Okay, go ahead and introduce.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Government Track keynote speaker event. I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge our sponsors for the Government Track. They are Lilt, Language Weaver, Systran, and Microsoft. Okay. Short introduction for Lucie Seguin. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the Translation Bureau of Public Services and Procurement, Canada. Key focus has been to provision the Bureau as a center of excellence in linguistic services for the Government of Canada and as a leader in artificial intelligence for language quality. Lucie oversees all the translation, interpretation, and terminology services that the Bureau provides in both official languages, English and French, in more than 100 Indigenous and foreign languages, and in sign languages to federal government departments and agencies, as well as to the Canadian Parliament. Lucie is actively implementing an artificial intelligence strategy to improve the Translation Bureau's capacity to effectively and clearly communicate with all Canadians, to ensure language experts have the knowledge, skills, and competencies required for the future, and to support the economic vitality of the language industry in Canada. And before joining the Translation Bureau, Lucie occupied several senior leadership positions in federal government agencies. She is the mother of 2 adult children, holds a bachelor's degree in education, a master's in public administration, and a Chartered Professional Accountants Canada certification. Okay, it is time. À vous, madame. Zach, can you stop sharing? Thank you.
I did.
Okay, so hi. Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Hi, Steve, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, super. I'm happy to be here. I'm having some internet connections, so the reality not only here in Canada, but around the world. So listen, I'm going to do my best. My colleague Marc is here with me and he will be flipping the slides so you at least see the content if you lose my voice. It is really a privilege to be here. I appreciate the invitation from the International Association of Machine Translation, as well as the Association of Machine Translation in the Americas. Pleasure to be here with other keynote speakers. I've been following the conference, really interesting discussions, and I appreciate the help of my colleague, Steve, who's our moderator today. So we can go next slide, Marc, please. Super. So I was asked to share my perspective as the Chief Executive Officer of the federal agency in Canada responsible for all linguistic services. But before I do that, let me give you a little bit of an overview of history. So it is an important industry with an estimated annual revenue generation of approximately $1.2 billion. It is a sector that employs 27,000, a little bit above that, Canadians on a full-time, part-time basis. And that includes translators, revisers, terminologists, project managers, and all of the other support functions, IT, HR, and finance. Some of this is direct employment, some of this is indirect employment. And what's interesting to note about the Canadian industry is that about 75% of businesses have fewer than 10 employees. So really only one of LSPs have 100 employees or more. So the Translation Bureau of Canada is in the 1%. Actually, the Translation Bureau is an agency of the government. It was created in 1934. to provide translation interpretation services to. I'll speak to you about the clients a little bit later. We translate about 350 million words for the government and for our parliament, and approximately 45% of that is outsourced to the private sector. So we rely very heavily on the private sector deliver on our important mandate. Translation Bureau of Canada ranks 14th largest LSP worldwide in according to CSA's most recent the top 100 language service providers survey. Largest employer as well of translators and interpreters in Canada. We have 1,300 employees, of which we have approximately 850 translators, interpreters, and terminologists. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Mark, if you can hear me, thank you very much. Perfect. So we have, in terms of when we talk about the lines of how really are broad in the sense that we provide translation and all of the sub-services in translation services, interpretation services, not only conference interpretation, but we also provide sign language and interpretation in Québécois, which is the French sign language. We also provide services such as closed captioning and speech reading. In terms of terminology, we have full-time terminologists that work for the Government of Canada, big team, and they've been very active. I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the achievements that they have made over the last year. And finally, I want to talk to you about the Language Portal of Canada. And this is a website through which we make available for free to Canadians, but also to our friends around the world, a number of tools and resources that you may find useful. So I invite you to go consult the Language Portal of Canada. But among other things, we have terminological tools such as Termium and terminology in both official languages, and that is French and English. So quick word on our clients. Really, we serve Parliament. Canadian Parliament includes a Senate and a House of Commons. We also provide services to the judiciary. So that includes the Supreme Court of Canada and other courts, levels of courts in Canada. And finally, departments and agencies, and that's the whole suite of departments and agencies. Defense, for example, health, our health agency, as well as passport services, and we do all of the national security agencies as well. So ultimately, we can move to next slide, please, Mark. Thank you very much. So what is unique about Canada is we have a context in which Canadians, citizens, have a constitutional right to receive their information from their government in 2 official languages. So that's the first point. So the Official Languages Act has been in place since 1969 and has recently been renewed in 2021, very recently. So what that piece of legislation indicates is that English and French are the official languages and have equal status. So that means Canadians have a right to receive simultaneously in English and French all of the information published and made available by government. And this piece of legislation is underpinned by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So it's really an important obligation. And last year, 2 other pieces of legislation have been were introduced. One is the Indigenous Languages Act, which is aimed to promote, preserve, and revitalize Indigenous languages in Canada. As it is the case, I think, internationally, in Canada, Indigenous languages are at risk of disappearing. So there is a great number of effort in the spirit of reconciliation with our Indigenous citizens and members of our community. The thrust has been to really move in the sense of promoting and preserving. And for the Translation Bureau of Canada, that means we have been receiving a lot more requests for translations in the 90 Indigenous languages that exist, but also for interpretation services. And finally, people with disabilities disabilities in Canada have rights to receive services from their government that they understand. So the Accessible Canada Act really is aimed to ensure economic, social, and civic parameters to ensure that all persons, regardless of their disability, can participate in our society. So really, this gives you a little bit of the context in which we are operating in Canada. Next slide, please, Mark. So for more than a year and a half, Canada, as well as other nations globally, and we're still going through it, have been in the middle of the action, in the heat of the action. The Translation Bureau, being the agency responsible to provide linguistic services, has been really at the forefront. So whether it be in delivering interpretation services for our Parliament, House of Commons, and Senate, in official languages, but also in foreign languages, as well as Indigenous languages, on all meetings related to COVID-19. On the top right corner of the slide, you see our Chief Medical Officer for Canada, Dr. Tam, and we have been the entity responsible to provide sign language interpretation for broadcast on all of the networks in our country. So you see at the bottom of her screen an interpreter, sign language interpreter in American Sign Language, as well as Langue des Signes Québécoise, so the French equivalent. At the bottom left-hand corner, this is an illustration of a communication from the Public Health Agency related to COVID-19 in Inuktitut. Inuktitut is one of the 90 Indigenous languages and dialects. But all of the content produced by our Public Health Agency has been promoted and provided in 49 foreign languages and Indigenous languages, and in a timely manner, and I'll talk about that. And finally, we have been active in the terminology department. There is, among others, a glossary on COVID-19 pandemic, where in a matter of a few days, our terminologists were hard at work developing French equivalents for English terms that were emerging in society, new terms that were entering the fold. And we currently have that glossary available for free on our language portal of Canada, if you're interested. And it contains more than 250 new terms, new notions. We'll go to the next slide, Mark. Super. So emergencies and language risks, rights, pardon me. So this is where one of the challenges in Canada, because of the rights and obligations of our citizens, the challenge is to communicate in both languages simultaneously and in a very timely manner. So this is one of the challenges that we have at the Translation Bureau. So we have to capitalize on technology, including machine translation and statistical translation and artificial intelligence, to be able to respond very quickly to ensure that the health and safety of our population is safeguarded. Maybe this isn't the case in all of the countries that you represent, but in Canada, there are still certain segments of our population that only speak one official language. Either the majority of Canadians speak English, but there is still a minority of Canadians that only speak French and do not understand English. Language rights are taken very seriously in Canada, and linguistic minority groups are very vocal. They're well organized and well resourced. So if bad quality translation is provided by an agency of the government, that formal complaints can be lodged. We have a watchdog for official languages. We now have a watchdog for Indigenous languages as well. But oftentimes these errors, these bad translations, have political ramifications, and not to mention the health and safety ramifications. Next slide, please. So we're providing you with an example. This is not a sophisticated AI, NMT, very well advanced, but in the early days, we were already investing in statistical machine translation. So this example of where we still have a service that we offer 24/7, where we are supporting Canadian meteorologists that are posted in 9 prediction centers across Canada. Usually they will write the weather alerts in English, unilingual. There are some that are written in French as well. So when we receive those alerts are pre-translated using our translation memory, and then we run them through a statistical machine for translation. And finally, a human translator from the Translation Bureau. They're available around the clock. They work 7 days a week, all days during the year, and they review and ensure quality control. And finally, those bilingual alerts approved by our human translators are shared over a plethora of different platforms, including our weather channels, our weather applications, as well as all social media applications. And all of this is done within 2 to 3 minute time frame. And for tornado alerts, we are able to do it within 2 minutes. Really important, again, for the safety of our citizens. Next slide, please. So machine translation has really evolved in the Government of Canada at the Translation Bureau. And as I mentioned, I gave you an example of really early days, final end of 70s example of a statistical engine we use for weather alerts. But we've been evolving and really trying to keep up to snuff for even at the leading edge of the use of machine translation, starting with statistical, moving into more sophisticated neural machine translation. And you'll see at the bottom of the screen, we are now, we have invested in a MT as a platform service. It is a new solution that we have named GC Lingua, GC for Government of Canada. And this cloud-based suite of tools really will be used by our staff, our internal linguists, translators. It will be used by our clients for the billing, request management, as well as reporting. And finally, it is used by the private sector, our suppliers, the LSPs that help us meet our mandate. So I'll go to the next slide, Mark, please. So what underpins our application of AI and MT is a really comprehensive strategy. So the Translation Bureau, it really wants to make sure that we're responding to stakeholder needs, and that really means that we're focused on enriching our data. Translation Bureau has a corpus of translated words of 4 billion terms, 4 with a B, billion. This is one of the richest English-French databases globally in the world. So I've heard a lot of discussion about the importance of data, metadata, metadata aware MT, but really the importance of data for us is really key and important to remain modern, to ensure that we are localizing our language. And also the high quality of training data for us is really important. That has gained a lot of importance, and we've been focusing on that over the past 3-4 years. And really what we're doing is taking steps to store and save as much data and metadata as we possibly can. Data management for us is a solid foundation. It's an objective that we have. Not to say that algorithms don't make a difference, they do, and we use them well. We use them to in the process to process machine translation, to improve them, but as well to estimate our MT output quality, and also prevent old translation memories from adding errors into our more modern corpora. So definite need. So still we're not, we don't pretend to have, figured it all out, but still in the future, we need to continue to shift to content-driven MT as well as metadata aware MT. And I remember from the keynote that our colleague from CSA Research did, these are all trends that we're following very closely to make sure that we remain relevant and also more importantly, relevant and responsive to our citizens so that they can get the information in a very timely fashion. I won't speak about other things like elimination of gender bias for government communication, really important for ethical and respect, and just adhere to a language that is neutralized. We're seeing how AI can support us, the ethical use of AI support us to achieve those goals. And also automated language and subject field identification. This is to help us internally make workload distribution easier. So I'll give you a couple of examples of work and projects that we are doing with our academic sector. So in Canada, there is a very active, there are several AI centers of expertise, and we work very closely with Université de Montréal. The researcher there, Yoshua Bengio, and his team, the Rally team. And we have a number of AI projects, research projects with their students underway, many under the quality rubric, because for us, quality is key. Quality means meeting the requirements of our legislative obligations. So we have a project to determine machine translation quality evaluation, and one machine translation quality estimation. So really looking at which system works best for a given text domain, or which system works best for a given document. So that's really interesting. And also looking at computer-assisted human translation quality control. So just to ensure that we have an ability to process large volumes in a short period of time, but also making sure that we're capitalizing on the human factor. One of the principles that we have is that we know that the humans are still key to delivering high quality translations. We don't foresee, and we're following the trends, but at a near future where the human is not key. But what we are trying to do is to shift our humans with their intelligence and judgments away from the tasks that can be automated and into more high value decision making. So other AI projects that we're also working on with Université de Montréal, some related to readability. Translation follow the same readability is important for us. Also, we have projects related to optimization and workflow. So trying to see how the AI bots and algorithms can help us assign the right document to the right translator without human intervention. So lots on the go for us, but we're still learning a lot, and we learn from having discussions with you as well and sharing best practices. I think we can go to the next slide, please, Marc. For LSP, although we work within a government context and we are not in competition with the private sector, translation, we still need to collaborate together, but also we need to deliver high quality services in a timely fashion. Like all of LSPs, we need to adapt or we will disappear or go dark, as you all know and we've heard. And there are people participating in this summit that represent many wonderful companies that are thriving and emerging and coming up with better and better and higher quality engines. We've quoted Microsoft Office 365 because that is the software application that the government of Canada has chosen. The opportunities there is that public servants now have access to their own translation tools, interpretation tools, closed captioning tools, for free, really, because they're provided always. But one of the risks is the quality, the risks with the not having those tools deliver equal quality in each language. And also we need to be conscious of the language rights in Canada and the foundations upon which our constitution are built. So for us, really, we're trying to not fear evolution. This is all good, but we're trying to see what is the value add that we can bring to basically meet our objective of delivering those services to Canadians seamlessly. Go to next slide now, please. So in Canada, I'm very pleased to say that we are not working in the silos. The federal government works very closely with the private sector. I will take 2 seconds to say hello to Robin Ayoub and acknowledge his great work. He is the president of the Canadian Language Industry Association. With him, as well as members of Canadian universities, academia, and the not-for-profit sector, we've been collaborating to explore and examine the impact of neural machine translation on translations in Canada. So we've had a chance to put together a group, a consultation committee with a mandate to examine the impact of NMT, not only on the quality of the translations, but also on the profession itself. Like, what is the future of this profession? What would be the skills needed? How can we recruit, retain the highest skilled linguists? But also we touched on topics related to measuring translator performance, and also how do we adapt our procurement tools to fairly compensate LSPs in a world where NMT is ubiquitous. So we've had members from, I mentioned, all sectors of society, and they've given us a lot of avenues for reflection and for future discussions. In terms of the skill set required, members that were participating in the group from Canadian universities, they're also responsible to establish the curriculum for the translation programs in Canadian universities. So we know that translation skills, writing skills, basic stuff, really important, but new comers to this field need to also be able to use techno-linguistic tools effectively. They need to have the project management skills, clear and simple communication skills also that will eventually help improve our corpuses and improve our data. Also skills that translators should acquire. So because we already have 800 plus translators within our translation bureau, it really is plain language and pre-editing skills. And this will eventually help our improve our machine output, and also terminology management skills and more advanced skills in like search engine features, knowledge of NMT related assessment measurements, etc. So really good collaboration that continues because we all share the goal of making sure that Canada remains at the leading edge. Being a bilingual country, we want to make sure that we take part fully in shaping the future also of our workforce. So I'll go to next slide, please, Marc. Super. So I won't spend a lot of time here because I think we're almost at time, but operating within a federal government offers some challenges, but also opportunities. Because we are a Government of Canada agency, we must ensure fairness with all of our contractual processes. So making sure that we respect the integrity of the contracting process, giving a fair chance to compete to all. We also have limited expertise in AI procurement. Within the government context, as soon as we write something, we post it to receive bids. The technology has already evolved, so it's really hard to keep pace. Transparency is key, as well as accountability for Canadians. We operate based on taxpayers' funds. Canadians expect that we would be good custodians of those public funds. So accountability for us, a lot of reporting, making sure that we explain, we get approvals before we spend public funds, and security. Obviously, the Translation Bureau provides services to our national security agencies, but also to our Supreme Court, our Parliament, our Prime Minister's office. So information of national interest must stay and not be divulged. So those are some of the key challenges that I think that are not unique to government, but they are also they may also be a reality for the private sector, but they add on some complexity. And I will finish with the last slide. If you can go to there, Mark. Where do we go from here? So really, this has been a great opportunity to participate for us because we need to continue the dialogue and the discussion with colleagues from around the world. Within Canada, we have a lot of dialogue with every sector of society at every jurisdictional level, but we're always looking to exchange and have discussions with other jurisdictions, other countries. We work very closely with the EU, European Parliament, all of the national institutions, global institutions, like NATO and others. So we have many collaborative agreements as well with universities. We intake students, at least 100 per year. We give them internships and then they return to school, finish their programs, and then they have concrete work experience once they hit the job market. So it's been great. Thank you so very much. I think at this point, Steve, I will throw it back over to you, and I hope things were not too choppy, but I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Lucie, thank you. There was a chop here and a chop there, but I think it came across very well. And
okay, good.
So let's let the questions begin. I've got one I'd like to ask you to start off with. First of all, nice job. Excuse me. I appreciate you mentioning the work of Yoshua Bengio and his group, and for anyone who might not know, Canada has made some very important contributions to the deep learning knowledge that is making having huge impacts in machine learning and, of course, machine translation. In your presentation, you mentioned toolkits for that are under evaluation. Can you mention any of those, or just maybe tell us how that comparison is going?
So yes, so we're looking at, with our colleagues at Université de Montréal, Yoshua Bengio and his students, but also with the National Research Council in Canada. We're basically experimenting with a number of tools and apps to see what combinations would be ideal. For example, we have implemented a pilot project with a number of our clients, the Department of Heritage Canada, a couple of our quasi-judicial clients, to see what kind of content do they have and which NMT tool performs the best with which kind of content. So I think that one thing that we've realized is that a principle is that not all efficiencies are the same. We can't expect the same result depending on the kind of text, how it is structured, how many matches we have in our translation memory, but lots to do still. But I think the key is experimenting and being able to, well, we use a word in Canada, agile, but being able to change as you see results coming, because we know that there are so many wonderful vendors out there, and I've seen some of the demos. Like I'm always blown away by the progress that is being made. You blink of the eye, and then things have changed.
I think we lost you, man. Oh, but you're back. Okay. Yes. Change is a constant, and change is accelerating at the present time. While we wait for more questions, I did want to ask you about, during a presentation earlier, I think it was by Mr. Simard, he mentioned what sounded like a rather conservative attitude toward translation between French and English, and that is most of the work that he was concerned with is always post-edited excuse me, is human translation, period. And only a small percentage of what we call that human, of machine translation assisted products actually come out. Do you have any comments on that? Over. Uh-oh.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry,
Yes,
Steve.
Yes, no.
My apologies to you all because my connection is not stable. So I caught a little bit of your question, but I think it's about an opinion about the post edition or the human intervention in ensuring quality, if I understood correctly.
Well, I guess so. Maybe I should just restate it more succinctly by saying Mr. Simard in his presentation gave me the impression that that MT is used sparingly and in a conservative fashion. Is that a good impression? Is that you? Over.
Okay, I caught a little bit of that. We have been using machine translation, but we also rely on translation memory and statistical machine translation still for the weather alerts, for example. But for what we believe is that we still need human intervention, increasing our use of NMT for sure to basically be able to process larger amounts of volume in a shorter period of time. But we have a very rigorous quality management framework where we have sampling, a sampling methodology that allows us to make sure that we have human eyes reviewing our most high visibility content, just to ensure that it does meet our the requirements under the Official Languages Act.
Yes, ma'am. In presentation, you mentioned Inuktitut. I don't know if I got that one right, but
yes,
of the Inuit people, and very challenging language because of its because of word formation. That a single word might be is a very long thing. Technology is challenging. Are you looking at making use of language technologies for Inuktitut?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very good question. Actually, Inuktitut is one of the most used and spoken languages, and it is one of the most codified languages. There is some use of technology. The National Research Council of Canada has developed some AI applications for Inuktitut, but it is one of the only ones actually. The second most frequently used language, Indigenous language, is Cree in Canada, then Mohawk, Ojibwe, Denezulin, and then there's like a series of others. But it really is at the embryonic stage because the data is simply not, substantive enough. But the territory of Nunavut in Canada has an official languages policy that obliges their government to communicate in Inuktitut and in English and in French. So I think that piece of policy will really push, at least for that language, it will push things a little bit forward.
Excellent. And I do have some questions for you here. I'm just a little slow in finding them. Does the TBC make corpora? And what kind of teams government? I'm not sure if you mentioned.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about corpora that might be produced or perhaps made available?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we do. I think there was also a question about Indigenous languages corpora. So we have very limited databases of terms translated in Inuktitut. We don't rely really on any automation for the indigenous languages. And 100% of our translations in indigenous languages are done by freelancers, so speakers of the language. But for other clients, we actually are developing corpuses or corpora for example, our health agencies, Public Health Agency of Canada and Health Canada, epidemiological data. Like we're creating corpuses or corpora that are specific to either our national security agencies, our policy organizations like our Prime Minister's Office, Privy Council Office. Transport Canada is another one. And then we have our Environment Canada clients. So our wish is that we will have AI basically and algorithms that are driven or that are fed by different corpora. And that is really where we're going. With 4 billion words, the issue with us is that we have our corpus is too big. So we've had to segment and fragment. And this is one of the research projects we're doing with the university colleagues to see how can an AI application help us determine which corpus is best for the type of text. So, you know, we're again, I think, beginning this. I won't say that we are at the bleeding edge, but I think we're starting to look at that.
Thank you. It looks like we have time for probably 2 more questions.
Okay.
It looks like the Canadian government has been supporting MT very much in line to the world. Do you have any suggestions if we PhD fresh graduate if we say PhDs or fresh graduates want to apply for some funding on MT from our own government, what might be the highlight? Okay, yeah, well, I think you probably got as I did. Any thoughts for government funding, not necessarily from your government? Over.
Yeah, very interesting. I think that is, I hope you can hear me, and I applaud the PhD and students, not only PhD, but all students that are participating. I think that it would be good, I would suggest that you look at the work that is being done at Université de Montréal, University of Toronto. We have 4 key hubs, AI hubs in Canada. It may be worthwhile entering into contact with some of the students. There are many networks and opportunities to engage, to basically ask those questions. Essentially for us, what's really interesting is that this field is so ripe for innovation and things are happening so quickly. So if there's a way for students to be able to show the concrete application, so it's really hard usually for scientists to kind of translate or give a a simple description of what this technology is really like could help us concretely achieve. I think that helps in applying, because the people that review the proposals and the people that decide to fund or not need to understand why is this important in concrete terms, and how will this affect people in their real lives. So, but I'd say reach out to, for sure, there are 10 Canadian universities that have translation programs, and some combine translation with IMIT. Université de Montréal is one. There are others. Our universities are starting to merge their IT and translation linguistics programs, because they're like inseparable now. I hope that offers a little bit of help.
I think it does, ma'am. It looks to me like the time is up. On behalf of the audience, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation, which was informative and fun as well. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much to you, Steve, and the host, and all of the Zach, and to the organizers. I look forward to discussing and exchanging again soon.
Très gentil. Merci, madame.
Merci. Au plaisir.
À la prochaine. Au revoir.
À la prochaine, soyez sages.
You can say. Everyone, please stay warm. Okay.